Thanks for the warm introduction, Chris, and excellent keynote, Katie, and also thanks, George and Bryson and the rest of the group for putting this conference on. I think the topic, right, of the actual people side of everything is, it doesn't get the attention it deserves, or the attention it deserves, right? Like, this is at the core of everything we do is collaborating, right? Everything, we're not going to be successful if we don't collaborate with each other. And especially when you talk about purple teaming, that's all purple teaming is, right? Like George mentioned earlier, it's collaborating between red and blue. And so I put purple team, I don't care what your definition. This isn't because I don't care about your definition, because your definition is valuable for you and your organization. But purple teaming, to me, it's much broader, right? It's not like these 3 steps in the process from, you know, some input from threat intel to an alert, right? It's just a collaboration between teams, and it's going to look different for everyone. And so necessary disclaimer, opinions of my own, but I'm not going to claim that they're original, of course. So back to the definition, right? If it moves the detection response capabilities forward, then really call it what you want. So if you're doing, you know, atomic red teaming, you're running scripts you pulled off the atomic red team GitHub, is that called purple teaming? Or if you have a really transparent red team where real time they're sharing what they're doing with the blue team, is that a purple team? Or maybe the blue team is already testing PTPs in a lab. Maybe that's your version of purple team, and that's fine, right? Who cares what exactly you're doing? If you're moving the detection response capabilities forward and you're using kind of a blend of the blue team side and the red team side, then sure, call it what you want. So about me, like Chris mentioned, red teaming at a software company. I also write articles and blogs. I have no supporting evidence, but I figure I fit in with most other major news outlets there, so not a big deal. Not sure where I fit. Like a lot of us, we're really passionate about security, and it might not be a specific thing you really love. You just kind of enjoy all of it. Spend a lot of time thinking how to improve things, which led me to putting together the materials for this talk. And also I created something called the Red Team Maturity Model that helps internal red teams develop. Not qualified to do most things I do. This is true for most things I do, and I love Reddit comments. I had to post this here. When I published the Red Team Maturity Model, this guy or woman, I'm not sure, was very skeptical of me, and I had to reply that I'm also very skeptical. So you should always be skeptical of what you read on the internet. Okay, so back to the talk, right? So you might feel like you need a purple team based on a number of different scenarios, right? You might be at a point where the red team doesn't get detected. The red team walks all over the organization, never gets detected, and something's not working, right? The red team is supposed to be improving detection, but things don't seem to be improving. Or the blue team doesn't know what to prioritize. The MITRE attack model, there's right, hundreds of tactics. There's so much to do, right? There's like, what do you focus on? And then maybe the red team's recommendation to the blue team, maybe they just don't get fixed, right? It's like throwing things down into a black hole. Or on the flip side, maybe the blue team is improving really quickly and they want to improve faster than the red team can provide recommendations to them. Either way, at the end of the day, you have a gap between the red team and the blue team, and you want to bridge that gap so you can move things forward faster. So it's not really difficult to go online and find a purple team framework and just apply it to your organization, but maybe that's not the best approach. I think it's good to use those models and to use mini models, but take what makes sense for your organization, because realistically, a generic model is not going to fit for every organization. Okay, so in this talk, there's really nothing definitive. So sorry to let everyone down, but really at the end of the day, no two orgs are going to have the same program. So I can't come in and say, this is how your purple team should work, because that's not how it should work. Your purple team should work however it makes sense for your organization. And then lots and lots of questions. So that's kind of the key to things, right? Is asking questions. And I think it's the key to collaboration as well. And there's actually a funny story about this. We're not, like the purple team industry or the security industry, like we're not alone in the fact that we're not good at asking questions. There's industries that are worth billions of dollars that don't ask questions, and things go really poorly for them. So there's a story by a French NGO. They were doing work in Zambia. The guy's name was Ernesto Cirillo. And they went down to Zambia and they were going to teach the locals how to grow produce, tomatoes, and cucumbers and whatnot. And so they brought all their seeds down there and all their agriculture equipment, and they found this beautiful river valley right along the Zambia River, and they planted all these crops, and it was absolutely phenomenal. Huge tomatoes. It was going really, really great. But for some reason, they were having to pay the locals to come out and help. The locals weren't interested in helping. And either way, so they paid the locals, they got them out there, they grew these crops, they were really, really proud of the work they were doing. And then one day, 200 hippos comes out of the water and destroys everything in one night. And this NGO group went to the locals there and were like, hello, why didn't you tell us? Like, this is a big deal. And the locals looked at them and said, well, you never asked us, right? And these are billion-dollar industries. And even they're having difficult time asking the right questions or asking questions, right? We all want to be helpful. We're just going to go there and help. So we're either like paternalistic, like, oh, we love you so much, we're going to help improve things, we're going to make things so much better. This is what you got to do. Or we go in and we're patronizing, which is, I think, common for some red teams, right? We know what to do to make things better. We just compromise your whole organization. You got to do all these things. You guys have to learn how to focus. You have to learn how to basically write the right detections and alerts, and you need these log sources, and basically you can't detect an adversarial threat right now, right? And that's patronizing, and we're not going to be successful with that approach. So of course we need an Oprah Winfrey quote, and most security talks ask the right questions and the answers will always reveal themselves. But really, purple teaming fits somewhere in here. And of course, there's many other teams involved. You have threat intel informing decisions. You have obviously managers and bosses and community and whatnot informing decisions as well. But in the really traditional sense, this is how things happen. This is how you go from, we need to alert on this thing, to we've tested the alert, we know it works. And purple teaming really is, I guess, making these really traditional siloed actions, doing these things in a collaborative method, right? So bringing these people to the same table. Maybe your purple team is, all they do is they go execute the attack, and then they send a list of all the IOCs off to, security operations center or something. Or maybe it's everyone's at the table, right? And they get together and they use threat intel and they use input from various sources and say, this is what we need to detect. And then you go through the whole process in real time with each other, all the way down to determining if the alert that's in place is actually responded to, right? So if it's somewhere in here, it doesn't have to be all of them. It can be some of them. It could be, right, the middle three or the middle two or the last one and the first one, right? It doesn't necessarily matter. So there's actually no easy trick. Just do it. And this is a shout out to Art Williams, not Sheila Booth. If you've seen the Art Williams motivational speech, it's much more motivational than Sheila Booth's. But really, like, the technical stuff, that's the easy part. Like, most of us on red teams, we know how to do lateral movement. We know how to escalate our privileges. We know how to do all the things that threat actors are doing. We know how to go to GitHub and test out new tools and new methods. But translating that technical prowess to actual results, that's the hard part. And I think it's really easy to forget those things. So there's a lot of things that we need to know before we can actually build our purple team. We need to know who our stakeholders are. So maybe our stakeholders are our incident responders. Like this question in the last talk, are we going to be driving incident response process? Maybe we're driving improvement in our level 1 analysts, or maybe we're trying to convince stakeholders in the business like IT or your SRE teams to go to things like gold images with logging already on there, right? So we got to figure out who those stakeholders are, and maybe it's all of them. Maybe it's the whole blue team. Maybe it's a blue team and IT. Maybe it's the blue team and a couple of their business units that are running their own infrastructure. And then what are we driving? And this goes back to who the stakeholders are. Are we trying to drive down the mean time to detection? Are we trying to drive down how long it takes from, we've identified something that we need detection for, all the way to testing that detection works? Are we driving down mean time to eradication? Like, what are we actually trying to improve here? And maybe it's all the things, right? Maybe we have a big list of things we're trying to improve, and the purple team is going to bring everyone together to just move the needle forward. And then how will it be done? Are we going to do things in a siloed nature where, I'm part of the purple team program, I'm going to go run something on a random system out in the environment and wait and see? Or maybe I'm going to send you a spreadsheet with some indicators of compromise, an IP address, or some hash values. Or will it be done really in real time, right? Like with the collaboration. Are we going to hop on a call and are we going to do this, in real time? Hey, I just ran this command. What do you see? So we have to understand how we plan on doing it, setting those expectations with our partners. And then, of course, what parts of the process are being done in silos. And this goes back to the kind of the flow chart I showed earlier. People are already doing these things in your organization, typically. You probably have some, if you're thinking about building a purple team, you probably maybe have some offensive security specialists, maybe you have some blue team people, some analysts, some incident responders. These are the people you want at the table because they're already doing parts of these. And then what is a deliverable? At the end of the day, when you're done with this purple team operation, what are you creating from that? Is it going to be a memo? Are you creating a report? Maybe it's just like a Jira ticket, or maybe you're just sending it like a Slack message saying, hey, this is what I did. Things are looking up. This was detected, right? So how are you actually delivering like something that somebody can see that improvements are being made? And then what should be measured? This goes back to what we're driving. If we're driving an improved time in our time to detection, that's what we need to measure. If we're trying to decrease the time it takes to eradicate a threat, that's what we need to measure, right? So we need to make sure we're measuring what we're driving, because that's how we're going to show our leadership that we're actually providing value to the organization. And then how will we track remediation? This is an easy one to kind of get missed, but in a perfect world, when you did a purple team operation, all the logs would be there. All the logs would be normalized. All the environments would have everything set up perfectly for you. But what you're going to realize is that there's going to be teams and there's going to be systems that don't have logs being sent, or the logs aren't normalized. So they're going to have to go normalize those logs so that they can actually write a rule for things, right? So there's going to be work that's being generated from these things. So how are we going to track those things? And when there's work generated, hey, I did this thing in the environment. Here's IOCs. Blue team goes back and says, yeah, we actually don't have logs for that. Okay, so now we need to open a ticket. We need to wait for this. It might take a month or 2 months before you guys get logs, and then we can build the alert for it. So we need to figure out how we're going to track those things. So this goes back to, this is a good fault in the last slide. We need to ask our stakeholders lots and lots of questions. And this is by no means all the questions. You're gonna, depending on your organization, you're gonna have to dive into these, right? Like, how do you track issues? You want to speak the same language as your stakeholders. You don't want to introduce a new way to track how you're tracking things, right? Nobody wants to go have to write their work down in this place and go to this platform, log their work, right? Some obscure GRC thing, right? We don't want to do that. We want to use a common language. What's their current workload? If resources are tight, right? If they don't have if your partners or stakeholders don't have the resources, maybe now's not the right time, or maybe you need to augment with something. Maybe you need to bring in a third party. And what do you want to get out of this program? So we all can agree, right? Like, we want to drive down the mean time to detect, or whatever it is. But everyone's got to have their own take on what they want to get out of that program. And you want to make sure their goals are aligned with that, so everyone can feel that they're getting the value that they need to get out of that program. And then how can you make this easier for them? If that means, make sure you're using the same tracking as them. If maybe it's a time zone issue, maybe all your incident responders are in Germany or something. Well, you might want to have to consider working weird hours when you want to work with them. So make it as easy as possible for your stakeholders. And this is now the right time to do this. A key component of this might be resources. It may be, we're migrating from Splunk to Elastic, or we're using some other SIM, some big changes are going on, like maybe now is not the best time. So you have to make sure that there's no big obstacles or big things that are going to get in the way of this program. And then how do you measure improvements? This goes back to what you're trying to drive, and you want to make sure you're tracking those improvements in a common language. Okay, so this might be a trigger warning for some folks. How do we prioritize where we improve our security capabilities? Is MITRE qualified? Or maybe your internal threat intel team is qualified? Or is your boss qualified? Is your CEO qualified? Heck, is the board qualified? And I would argue that no one of these groups is singularly qualified to prioritize where security capabilities need improved or implemented. Like your CEO, you could say TTPs, and they might look at you, a blank stare. They have no idea what you're talking about. But your CEO might understand what systems in your environment, what applications, what data would be a cure-ending event for that CEO, or would cause huge regulatory impact on your company, huge monetary impact. That's valuable input for determining where you're going to prioritize, right? And of course, threat intel. What are threat actors actually doing? And so you want to put all these things together to help you prioritize where you're going to focus. So you have to remember, get creative, crown jewels, right? Like your crown, and I have a slide that have a pictures worth 1,000 words, right? But your crown jewels are why you're employed. Like whatever your business uses to make money, that's why you're employed, and that's what you need to protect. And also, there probably aren't atomic red team scripts for the stuff that really, really matters. I'm not saying they're not valuable. They have immense value and they're an awesome resource. But the things that really, really matter, right? Like malicious database queries on a production database with all of our credit card numbers. That's important. There's probably not a script just to do that for you out of the box. So this is actually a network diagram from where I work. No, I'm just kidding. It's not. But but this is, typically how networks. You have SaaS things with connections into your network. You have bring your own device policies. You have all these enclaves, different networks or different teams, and then all of these things, right? Like they're all are here to support your crown jewels. That's what the hackers are after, right? Like that's what your business uses to make money. That's your PII. That's your PCI data, or that's your source code, or right. Like that's it. Like that's why you're in business. That's why we're profitable, and everything else is just here, right, to support it. So let's get creative and let's focus on those first. Okay, so that's a lot of work. All those questions, that takes a long time to work through. There's lots of people at the table. Now, once we've answered those things, we can start to look at the technical solutions, because now we know what we need in a technical solution. So maybe you need a full C2. Maybe you just need to run scripts, right? Maybe you don't want to do C2. Maybe you're just going to run completely custom scripts on random endpoints that do random TTPs, or not random, but threat-informed TTPs. And then, do you want to run these on random production end user hosts? Well, guess what? We answered that question. We know how we're doing this. We know that either A, we're going to be doing it with full realism. We want to run these TTPs on a random system out in the environment and see how the incident responders handle that. Or we want to do this on, a sanctioned endpoint, and the blue team knows that this is purple team work, but let's, put ourselves in the mindset we're going to treat it like a real incident so we can practice, right? Those questions will be answered already. So you will know, what makes sense. And if that's the case, like IT has scripts. IT has done this forever. Jamf, ServiceNow, Rundeck, Intune, all these things, as red teams know, they can run scripts and software and binaries on everything in the environment. You can use those, right? Deploy a script that runs some malicious things on endpoint and see what happens, right? So lots of different options there. And option or way I like to decide on what new product I'm using is analysis alternatives. So a key decision factor in this is, what are we driving? What metrics make this purple team program successful? And then using that as input, you can start to go through all your different options. IT tools like Jamf or something in spreadsheets. That'll probably work, right? Like that's a very simple approach, but hey, it might work. Or maybe you got to go use some commercial product. And as you mature, you might realize you need to go to some commercial product. Or maybe as you try to scale, right? You might need some assistance from a commercial product. Okay, so you've looked at everything and now you understand how to move forward. You know who's involved, you know what's going to be involved, you know what you're doing, you know why you're doing it, and you know how you're doing it, you know how many you're doing, and you know what you're measuring, and everyone at the table knows this as well because you've asked them, so they know. So if we go back to like what didn't we do? We didn't start with the solution. We didn't start with some cool purple team tool or some model that we found that we want to just plug and play into the organization. We didn't start with any assumptions of how things worked. So we built a really strong foundation for our program. So also important, and this is not purple team specific, but we want to speak the same language as our stakeholders. If they're formal, be formal. If they have a military background, you know, try to abide by that. Try to get in their language. If they use Jira, for example, use Jira, right? Like you want to make things as easy as possible for them. If they, you know, want to keep things impromptu or something, keep it impromptu. If they don't like, they're scared of scheduled things, don't do scheduled things. And then this last bullet, like Chinese food, take them over for Chinese food. This isn't like a joke. This is like really, if you're in the same location, I know many of us are remote nowadays, take them out for lunch, right? And don't talk about work. Talk about them, talk about their family, make a relationship with them. The better your relationship is with your stakeholders, the more successful your program is going to be. Partner with those who want to partner. If there's groups that aren't interested in improving, don't help them. That's like the golden rule of charity, right? Like if a team or if an organization or a group of people don't want to be helped, simply don't help them. And part of this is like, for some reason, information security, we're really notorious for wielding sticks, right? If compliance, you have to abide by, and all these different things you have to do now, non-negotiable things, right? That makes the bar for carrots really, really low, right? Call out good behavior, send people swag when they partner with you, or create a challenge coin thing for people that do really well with security. And then the last bullet here, which is very, very important, right? Understand the business. This is obviously more than, it deserves more than a bullet on a slide, but you should understand like how your business makes money, and you should understand the risk appetite of your business. These things will help set your program up for success as you help prioritize and send recommendations to various teams. And last but not least, avoid bias. For some reason, well, not for some reason, I think we all know why, there's a lot of cynicism in this industry, and cynicism leads to negative bias. We don't see things improving, so we're like, oh, you know, that team doesn't care about security. But really, I would hazard to say that most teams understand their own business better than you understand their business. They have their own needs. They have their own set of priorities to the business that you probably don't understand. So this goes back to what we talked about earlier, right? Empathy. And with that, there's no one way to purple team. Keep asking questions and stay positive. And if you ask the right questions, you will have a very solid foundation for purple team program. Thank you.